Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hello, everybody in our SimplyTrade listening world. We are in for a great discussion today. There has been so many things going on. There have been a lot of proposals and ideas that have been hopping, kind of like popping popcorn. I mean, it's all over the place. So we are so excited to have a discussion today. This is going to be a good show, I think, to talk about the some of the recent activities of some of the proposals from Trump, and there's the threat of tariffs and all this kind of stuff. But for right now, folks, Lala, I'll tell you this. This is putting the compliance and trade folks right back at the table with the executive levels. Things are happening so fast that I'm a big one and keep telling people there's a difference of reacting and responding. Don't react, and we need to respond. But what do you think about that, my friend?
No, I do too. I mean, I have in the last, I would say, few weeks, obviously, even before Inauguration Day, have been talking to several folks because, unfortunately, some of them may have a limited budget, if any budget, like for training, obviously, because that's what we do here is training. And they're asking for, like ideas and tips on how they can stay updated and et cetera, and I obviously point them to the podcast. This is free. You get a lot of recent updates and everything, but you're not really getting training. I mean, the training, there's a difference between like going to a conference and getting information and updates to what we do, which is going to an actual training where you go into the weeds of things and you actually learn how to move things around and everything. But anyway, I just tell them, to me, I'm telling them to try to convince management. If budgets are tight or whatnot, I mean, that's one thing, but they've got to look at what the current climate is. Like you said, we're back at the table. It's funny because recently I heard somebody say, if you're not at the table, you're part of the menu. So
I love that one.
I love it. I love that. I thought that was an Andyism. Too bad you didn't come up with it, Andy. But anyway, so we can start using that one, Andy. So
there you go. If you're not at the table, you're part of the menu. I love that one.
Yeah, and it's true though, because I mean, how else are you going to stay up with this? You need some kind of budget to do training to stay up with this. I mean, just finding out different things here and there is not going to get you anywhere because it changes. And off the air, we were talking to our guest, Eric Hargraves. We were talking to him and he said, or was it you, Andy? One of you, both of you might have said it, that don't react to tweets, and because look at what happened this weekend. As we record this, look at what happened this weekend. The Colombia situation went from horribly bad to back to normal within almost 12 to 18 hours. I mean, it didn't take that long. I mean, and things normalized back again. But had somebody reacted to that, can you imagine?
People were reacting to it to make comments, but it made themselves look foolish, because they jumped too soon to make comment.
Yeah, I meant a businessman. Can you imagine a business person, a business that might have a lot of interest? They're Colombian and they're shipping to the U.S. and they're like, start firing people, because they wouldn't be able to. Although I still go back. We posted something here under Global Training Center, and SimplyTrade shared it yesterday. And again, for reference, this was around the 28th of January, where we reposted a video that someone recorded on TikTok on who pays the tariffs? I mean, this guy on the street said, no, the Chinese do. Chinese are paying the tariffs. It's like, no, the importer does. And then there was a long explanation on that. So anyway, it's just that. I mean, it's like not knowing, reacting. Sandler and Travis, we had them on the show as well. And they, Nicole Bivens, she said, don't take the bait. That's what she learned from the first administration. Just this time around, don't take the bait. Just wait and see how the dust settles, So, but anyway, let's bring in our guest before we take too long on this.
Well, folks, y'all have had, you've heard this voice before. This is somebody that is definitely, he's one of the sharper tools in the shed. And I will say Eric Hargraves. Eric, my memory is as long as the turtle's tail here. Tell me again what company you're with. You're in the on the Eastern Seaboard there, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I'm with Elliot Davis, and I lead our supply chain advisory practice. So we help companies, usually in the mid-market, small and medium enterprises up to maybe 500 million to $1 billion, kind of plan out their supply chain activity. Largely importers, but we have, several offices located in the Southeast and one in India. And we're a 100-year-old tax firm that also has audit and consulting like a lot of other folks. And where I'm specifically and narrowly focused on global trade. So that's where I come in. And I'll second what Lala was saying earlier, that education is key, particularly right now. It's kind of elevating supply chain and global trade compliance to the forefront, the current landscape. And we've got, a president who can't stop saying the word tariff, which is wreaking havoc on, everybody's trying to plan and prepare and scenario plan, what if. And I think what we were all saying here is, don't take the bait, don't shift your policies and your scenario plans based on tweets. But I do think the key word is preparedness. Like if you're going to be resilient, if you're going to have a resilient supply chain, the key word is preparedness. So you should be sort of wargaming, so to speak, changes in policy that are coming.
You were talking about what does it mean in trade and trying to plan for it in supply chain of America First type philosophy?
It's in the America First trade policy, which is the memorandum, the executive action that Trump initiated on January 20th. There are a lot of things in it. You mentioned de minimis. That's listed in potentially closing the de minimis loophole, the exemptions on low value imports into the U.S. Then following that up, actually before the inauguration, the Restoring Trade Fairness bill it's a bipartisan bill that really targeted revoking China's normal trade relations status. That also has an elimination of the de minimis exemption within it, right? So we're really targeting China with a lot of these trade policies that, they're not law yet and they're not necessarily actionable intelligence, but they are something that you need to consider within your supply chain. And do you have the technical solutions like duty avoidance, duty minimization, duty drawback, first sale, tariff engineering, and so forth that can help you reduce your tax burden, but also operational solutions like exshoring your production or having contingent sources of supply in free trade agreement areas of the world where your risk of having all your eggs in one basket where you're producing only in one origin jurisdiction, we need to start moving away from this just-in-time inventory mentality or one source with demand aggregation into multiple sources with contingent sources of supply. So it is shifting the way we think about supply chains.
Over the last 4 years under Biden, we really didn't negotiate any new free trade agreements. We probably tried to strengthen them a little or just clean them up a little. And I've been making this point quite often here when I have guests that talk about it, is this next 4 years, we run into a situation where all three leaders of the countries that are members of USMCA are newly elected. So we got a new president in Mexico, and soon to have a new prime minister in Canada. It's very obvious that Trump's focus to me, it seems like I just want to do a bilateral agreement. I want to negotiate with this country and let's take care of us, our interests that way. And then instead of having this, like in this case, it's a trilateral. How do you see that? I mean, how do you see that being affected, like with USMCA is the largest free trade agreement in the world. Well, I guess not really. I guess there's that one in the Asian one, I guess, that it's actually growing a lot more because there's a lot more member countries and China's in it. So, but technically speaking, USMCA and the legacy of it, NAFTA, have traditionally always been the world's largest free trade agreement with a lot more volume and trade going back and forth. I feel that that's a concern. I don't know. I mean, it especially me being here on the border, in the El Paso, Mexico border, it does affect our local economy quite a bit, and I'm sure the whole border region. I'm just trying to. We will have a guest that's going to come on our show and talk about the Mexico policy and like the nearshoring and stuff like that. So we don't need to go into too much detail on that. But what are your views on that?
Man, I think what a great question. A loaded question, to be honest, because I think what we see Trump doing right now with his Truth Social posts and the America First trade policy, specifically calling out USMCA, we're talking about the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal, right? And we're starting early for that 2026 review of USMCA in the negotiation process. I think rules of origin and regional value content are going to come under scrutiny. And I think we're going to see some real specific protectionist language around rules of origin and regional value content and calculations of that, and some strict enforcement because, and leaning on our neighbors like Mexico to really delineate how much of this was manufactured in Mexico versus how much of it was imported from China or transshipped or whatever. And I think it's going to come under a lot of scrutiny because I do know there's been some legal challenges on being able to meet the rules of origin for duty-free imports into the U.S. from Mexico, but then Section 301 tariffs still applying because of the Chinese content in the product that's being imported. And I think we're going to see a narrowing focus on that type of regional value content in the rules. Like same thing in CAFTA DR. I'd be surprised if we didn't go after some of that as well to say how much Chinese product is making it into American goods that are finished their transformation, their substantial transformation in one of our neighboring friend-shore partners that has a free trade agreement with us. I think we're going to narrow that. We're going to sharpen that pencil on the calculations of how much value and content actually originated within our partners, within our free trade agreement partners.
One of the best things you can do is figure out how to respond to this and be able to be that voice that is common sense and say, calm down. Yes, there's a lot going on. Here's what we need to do for right now. Sit tight and let's wait till the dust settles. At the same time, when we have the opportunity, here's what we want. You as an executive may be asked, what do you think from your company if it's a large company? Or your company may be asked, if you're part of a trade association, what is it that you need to put forward? So think of those issues and put them forward. Would you agree with that, Eric? And with that, what would you say is, kind of a communication type outline that you should put together?
I like to focus on two major there are technical things you can do to mitigate the risk, right? But there's two sides to every coin. One side faces the dark and the other side faces the light, right? And so sometimes with every type of new policy, there are challenges that we would say on the dark side of it. And there are also opportunities on the light side of it. And I think we need to look at the opportunities, not just to mitigate risk, but also to improve selling markets for all of our products. And I think the America First trade policy is trying to define exactly what that is. And we'll see, again, like you just said, don't overreact right now and start shifting your supply chain around until there's some clarity. But I would be prepared. And two ways you can prepare is looking at technical solutions that will sort of drive down your costs. We talked about some of those earlier, like first sale and duty drawback and tariff engineering and foreign trade zones and free trade agreements. We've talked deeply about that. But the other side of that are some operational solutions like exshoring your production if you're an importer, looking at other production manufacturing environments that are within for friendly origin jurisdictions with the U.S. And probably don't have the geopolitical risk of a massive trade deficit with us, because that highlights one of the key strategies that we always advise our clients who are looking for opportunity to move production to mitigate the risk of Section 301 tariffs or restrictive trade policy that might be coming down the pike is this idea of the difference between geopolitical distance and geographic distance, right? Modern supply chains were built on geographies that had essentially low cost wage and maybe 8,000 miles away where you actually make the product that you're then going to sell in your selling markets. And we're revisiting that now. Like we're actually starting to trade in geographic distances that are much closer. But this idea of geopolitical distance is one that the McKinsey Institute did a great job of highlighting trade flows between people and their UN voting records. And are they geopolitically close in their ideology or are they far away? And I would focus your agenda on three things. Retaining market access in the US, maintaining business continuity and sell-through, and then lastly, containing cost. Because there is an inflationary aspect to tariffs, but there's also a market aspect to it. And you talked about that earlier on what are the opportunities coming at U.S. firms? And I think you need to just have that be your agenda weekly and update your executive committee on retaining market access, maintaining business continuity throughout the world, and containing cost. And if you could cover those three bullet points, I think you'd be in a really solid position. At least have some scenario plans and what ifs lined up that say, if the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico come to fruition, how are we going to pivot? Do we have contingent sources of supply? Can we be consistent with some of the rules of origin or regional value content that might come out of that? And stay informed, take advantage of Global Training Center and the education that's out there and learn more and understand the markets in which you're operating, not just from a product standpoint, but from a market access standpoint, from a compliance standpoint. And that's where you guys do such a great job educating your listeners. I would stick with it, stay informed, and get weekly briefs until we have something concrete.
Right. Well, I'll say this, folks, we're going to have Eric's contact information with our show notes. There's some things that may come up that I would say, Lalo, from y'all's perspective, you might need to have somebody put together some of the recent or some of the training you guys might want to suggest to say, this is what will give, make a person more proficient or up to speed on certain areas of what to look at, but and publish those kinds of things. But our newsletters that Global Training Center's putting out, some the comments and shows from SimplyTrade. There's been some recent shows that Anik did with Cindy Allen that was just recently out there, and I thought Cindy had some really good points. Doesn't matter if some of these things are said from a political standpoint. Let's take the politics out. Let's look at the lay of the land. There's going to be some changes. It's not the same administration, same approach. So I don't know, Eric, do you think that's, again, it comes back, take the politics out of it, knowing full well that's where the winds are blowing. What's the repercussions of some of this stuff? And that's what you got to plan for.
Yeah, I agree. Try to remove personality from it and focus on the process and the policy and, don't be emotional about these decisions, be informed. And I think that's where you guys do such a great job informing people, and your guests do an excellent job presenting excellent information. So it's a great resource for everyone.
Thank you for joining us. And we hope to have you, on our next episodes. We're trying to be as fluid, not fluid, as updated as possible. And we're trying to keep this going as current as possible. Sometimes we'll record a show by the next time that But by the time it comes out, it's already outdated because the things move so fast. But we're trying really hard. So thank you all for your patience and for continuing to listen to us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.